Hello and welcome to MBKM Models. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and follow for more aircraft documentaries and model build videos. This video is dedicated to the men and women who worked at the Bristol Aeroplane Company at Filton in Bristol, later British Aerospace and Rolls-Royce Bristol Engine Division, where I did my apprenticeship as a sheet metal fitter, some of whom lost their lives when a packed air raid shelter was hit by the Luftwaffe during a daylight raid during World War II. Lest we forget, the Bristol Type 156 Beaufighter, often called the Beau, is a British multi-role aircraft developed during the Second World War by the Bristol Aeroplane Company. It was originally conceived as a heavy fighter variant of the Bristol Beaufort torpedo bomber. The Beaufighter proved to be an effective night fighter, which came into service with the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain, its large size allowing it to carry heavy armament and early airborne interception radar without major performance penalties. The Beaufighter was used in many roles, receiving the nicknames Rockbeau for its use as a rocket-armed ground attack aircraft and Torbeau as a torpedo bomber against Axis shipping, in which it replaced the Beaufort. In later operations, it served mainly as a maritime strike ground attack aircraft, RAF Coastal Command having operated the largest number of Beaufighters amongst all other commands at one point. The Royal Australian Air Force also made extensive use of the type as an anti-shipping aircraft, such as during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. The Beaufighter saw extensive service during the war, with the RAF deploying 59 squadrons. Fleet Air Arm 15 squadrons, RAAF 7 squadrons, Royal Canadian Air Force 4 squadrons, United States Army Air Forces 4 squadrons, Royal New Zealand Air Force 2 squadrons, South African Air Force 2 squadrons and Free Polish Air Force 1 squadron. Variants of the Beaufighter were manufactured in Australia by the Department of Aircraft Production, the DAP. Such aircraft are sometimes referred to by the name DAP Beaufighter. Large orders for the Beaufighter were placed around the outbreak of the Second World War, including one for 918 aircraft shortly after the arrival of the initial production examples. In mid-1940, during an official visit to Bristol's Filton facility by the Minister of Aircraft Production, Lord Beaverbrook, the minister spoke of the importance of the Beaufighter to the war effort and urged its rapid service entry. While the aircraft's size had once caused skepticism, the Beaufighter became the highest performance aircraft capable of carrying the bulky early airborne interception radars used for night fighter operations, without incurring substantial endurance or armament penalties, and was invaluable as a night fighter. For the maximum rate of production, subcontracting of the major components was used wherever possible, and 2 large shadow factories to perform final assembly work on the Beaufighter were established via the Ministry of Aircraft Production. The first, operated by the Fairey Aviation Company, was at Stockport, Greater Manchester, and the second, shadow run by Bristol, was at Weston-super-Mare in Somerset. Output of the Beaufighter rose rapidly upon the commencement of production. Through 1940 to 41, the manufacturing rate of the Beaufighter steadily rose. On the 7th of December 1940, the 100th Filton-built aircraft was dispatched. The 200th Filton-built aircraft followed on the 10th of May 1941. On the 7th of March 1941, the first Fairey-built Beaufighter Mark I performed its first test flight. The first Western-built aircraft reached the same milestone on the 20th of February 1941. The volume of production involved, along with other factors, had led to a shortage of Hercules engines being expected, jeopardizing the aircraft's manufacturing rate. The next variant, the Beaufighter Mark II, used the Merlin engine instead. On the 22nd of March 1941, the first production Beaufighter Mark II, R2270, conducted its maiden flight, and squadron deliveries commenced in late April 1941. By mid-1941, manufacture of the Beaufighter varied to meet the demands of RAF Fighter Command and RAF Coastal Command. Early aircraft were able to be outfitted and perform with either command, but later the roles and equipment diverged. leading to the production of distinct models, distinguished by the suffixes F for Fighter Command and C for Coastal Command were used. Often one command opted for modifications and features that the other did not. This occurred with the bellows type dive brake that became standard for Coastal Command Beaufighters for its usefulness in torpedo bombing, production of the earlier Beaufort in Australia and the great success of British-made Beaufighters by the Royal Australian Air Force, contributed to the Australian government deciding in January 1943 to manufacture Beaufighters under the Department of Aircraft Production DAP organisation at Fisherman's Bend, Melbourne, Victoria from 1944. The DAP Beaufighter was an attack and torpedo bomber known as the Mark 21. Design changes included Hercules 7 or 18 engines and some minor changes in armament. By September 1945, when British production ended, 5,564 Beaufighters had been built by Bristol and the Fairey Aviation Company at Stockport and RAF Ringway, also by the Ministry of Aircraft Production and Routes at Blythe Bridge. When Australian production ceased in 1946, 364 Mark 21s had been built. The Beaufighter arrived at squadrons in Asia and the Pacific in mid-1942. A British journalist said that Japanese soldiers called it the Whispering Death for its quiet engines, although this is not supported by Japanese sources. The Beaufighter's Hercules engines used sleeve valves which lacked the noisy valve gear common to poppet valve engines. This was most apparent in a reduced noise level at the front of the engine. In the Southeast Asian theatre, the Beaufighter Mark 51F operated from India as a night fighter and on operations against Japanese lines of communication in Burma and Thailand. Mark 10 Beaufighters were also flown on long-range daylight intruder missions over Burma. The high-speed, low-level attacks were very effective despite often atrocious weather conditions and makeshift repair and maintenance. The Royal Australian Air Force was a keen operator of the Beaufighter during the Second World War. On the 20th of April 1942, the RAAF's first Beaufighter 1C, an Australian designation given to various models of the aircraft, including the Beaufighter 51C, Beaufighter 10, and Beaufighter 10-1C, which had been imported from Britain, was delivered. The last aircraft was delivered on the 20th of August 1945. Initial RAAF deliveries were directed to No. 30 Squadron in New Guinea and No. 31 Squadron in Northwest Australia, before DAP Beaufighters arrived at RAAF units in the Southwest Pacific Theatre. The Beaufighter Mark 1C was commonly employed in anti-shipping missions. The most famous of these was the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, during which Beaufighters were used in a fire suppression role in a mixed force with USAAF Douglas A-20 Boston and North American B-25 Mitchell bombers. Earlier in the battle, 8 forts from No. 100 Squadron RAAF at Milne Bay had unsuccessfully attacked the Japanese troop convoy with torpedoes and scored no hits. 13 Beaufighters of No. 30 Squadron flew in at mast height to provide heavy suppressive fire for the waves of attacking bombers. The Japanese convoy, under the impression that they were under torpedo attack from forts, made the tactical error of turning their ships towards the Beaufighters, which allowed the Beaufighters to inflict severe damage on the ship's anti-aircraft guns, bridges and crews during strafing runs with their 420mm nose cannons and 6 wing-mounted 303A-inch 7.7mm machine guns. The Japanese ships were left exposed to mast-height bombing and skip bombing attacks by the U.S. medium bombers. 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sunk for the loss of 5 aircraft including 1 Beaufighter. The role of the Beaufighters during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea was recorded by war correspondent and filmmaker Damien Pera, who had flown during the engagement standing behind the pilot of one of the No. 30 Squadron aircraft. The engagement led to the Beaufighter becoming one of the more well-known aircraft in Australian service during the conflict. On the 2nd of November 1943, another high-profile event involving the type occurred when a Beaufighter, AY-1954, won the second of 2 unofficial races against an AY-20 Boston bomber. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and until next time.